Well, hello, Georgia Tech. It's wonderful to be back here. Thank you all so much for gathering on a Monday afternoon. Don't y'all have exams? I know you do. And that's why it means so much that you would gather in this way. Let's hear it for our senior United States Senator, my brother from another mother, John Ossoff. So grateful to Senator Ossoff, and I'm deeply honored to work alongside him in the Senate. We got to know each other during really the last cycle, and especially during the last runoff. Proud of the work that we've been able to do together in the Senate on behalf of all Georgians. So let me get right to the point. We've been engaged in this work and in this movement together for a while now. I started on this journey to the Senate about 3 years ago. And now there's only one day left. But it all really comes down to this. We need you to show up. Are you ready to win this election? I'm not sure. Are you ready to win this election? We got one more day. And so I need you to tell your friends to show up to vote. I'm not worried about anybody in this room. As I said, I know y'all got exams and things to do, and so anybody who in the midst of all of that would come out here to listen to me is going to vote. Many of you have already voted. And so I want you to know that your assignment, if you've already voted, your assignment is not yet done. Your assignment is to get some more of your friends. Matter of fact, call your father and your mother, your sister and your brother. Call Lottie, Dottie, and everybody. Tell them it's time to vote. Tell them that a vote is a kind of prayer for the world we desire for ourselves and for our children. And our prayers are stronger when we pray together. Tell them that your vote is your voice. And your voice is your human dignity. I believe in voting. I believe in democracy. I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud of this experiment, this grand experiment in government by the people. This covenant that we have with one another. E pluribus unum, out of many one. I believe that democracy is the political enactment of a spiritual idea. This notion that each of us has within ourselves a spark of the divine. That we were created in what the theologians describe as the imago Dei, or the image of God. And if you're not given to that kind of religious language, that's fine. Our tent is a big tent. Simply put it this way, we each have value. And if we have value, we ought to have a voice. And the way to have a voice in a democracy is to exercise your constitutional right to vote. Nothing could be more important for our democracy in this moment than your showing up. And I just want you to know that I am so very proud of the ways in which young people are showing up all across the length and breadth of our state of Georgia. And it's making a difference. They said you wouldn't show up, but you're showing up, and it's making a huge difference. And in fact, one of the things that I've enjoyed most about this campaign is coming on college campuses. And I spent a lot of time on college campuses speaking to young people. I enjoy it because here's what I know. There have been no great movements in our country without the energy and the enthusiasm, the passion, intelligence, and impatience of young people. And sometimes old people have a way, people my age are saying, young people are so impatient, they're so impatient. Well, I didn't come to Georgia Tech to dismiss or criticize your impatience. I actually came to stir it up. We need folk who are impatient. We need folk who are not content with things as they are, who know that while we live in a great country, we can always make it greater. We need the impatience of young people. If you go back and study what happened during the Civil Rights Movement, if you look at what happened in Birmingham, Alabama, as they pushed to integrate public accommodations, that movement really took off when young people got involved. It wasn't just college students, it was high school students. It wasn't just high school students, it was middle school students. In fact, there were some elementary school students who walked out of their classrooms, and the rest is history. There have been no great movements, whether we're talking about the Civil Rights Movement or women's suffrage or equal rights or the LGBTQ movement or movement for workers. We need the restlessness of young people. My only concern is this. I just don't want your impatience with the rate of change to cause you to give in to despair, because it can be frustrating. I can admit that as somebody who's been in this struggle a long time. Even as we continue to fight for the humanity of all of us. When I was running the last time, during the last cycle, we saw the emergence of an old problem in our country, as it was tragically revealed in the tragic killing of George Floyd. And there we were in the midst of a pandemic, dealing with COVID-19. And all of a sudden we saw the tragic killing of a citizen at the hands of those who had betrayed their oath to protect and to serve. But in the midst of that moment, we saw a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-faith, multi-generation coalition of conscience mask up to protect themselves from one pandemic, and you hit the streets in order to wage non-violent war against the old pandemic of racism. And I was deeply inspired by that. But as I saw young people on the streets protesting the tragic killing of George Floyd in 2020, I could not help but remember that in 1999, there I was as a young graduate student in seminary in New York City when an African immigrant by the name of Amadou Diallo was shot dozens of times, standing on his own stoop, reaching for his own wallet, and blown away. And there I was a whole generation later, 20 years and more later, and there you were fighting the same fight. The rate of change can be frustrating. It happens in fits and in starts. And sometimes we take 2 steps forward, then we take 1 step backwards. Our democracy expands, and then sometimes it contracts. But any mother will tell you that even contractions are necessary for new birth. And so you have to suffer through the contractions, knowing that if you keep on pushing, change is always possible. And I don't know about you, in this defining moment in America, I'm ready to keep on pushing. Keep pushing for democracy. Keep standing up for the rights of ordinary people. Keep working hard to build a Georgia that embraces all of its citizens. Keep pushing until a child's outcome is not based on their parents' income. Keep on working until we ensure that everybody has access to health care and access to the American dream, and workers can share in the prosperity that they create for others. We need your impatience and your restlessness. We need you to stand up, and I want to know, are you ready to do that, Georgia Tech, one more time? Are you ready to get this thing done? The whole goal of voter suppression is to so demoralize the electorate that you don't even bother trying. It's not simply to make it difficult to vote, but it is to frustrate you. And so that's why when I heard that they were playing games going into this runoff election, saying that you can't vote the Saturday after Thanksgiving because there's something in the law that says you can't have an election 2 days after a holiday, and they mentioned Thanksgiving and then another day that honored Robert E. Lee. They said, you know, if it were left up to us, we'd let you vote, but it's in the law, it's right there. Sorry, our hands are tied. And so I decided to sue them and untie their hands. And we won. But I want you to think about this as we get ready to go into tomorrow, the last opportunity you have to vote. They said we can't allow Saturday voting because it's in the law, and our hands are just tied, and they were misinterpreting the law. They said our hands are tied. I took them to court. We won. The judge untied their hands, and then they showed their hands. Because then they appealed the judge's ruling. If the issue were simply that their hands were tied, it seems to me that when the judge said, no, it's okay if the counties want to have Saturday voting, they can have Saturday voting. Doesn't it seem logical to you then that if you were an official of Georgia, you would then get busy? I know you would, trying to facilitate what the judge said you could actually do and make it easier for Georgia citizens to vote? Doesn't that make sense? But instead, they got busy using the taxpayers' resources to make it difficult for taxpayers to vote, filing an appeal. And we beat them again. And that was over the weekend. Then Monday rolled around. And they filed an order for emergency relief. It was the Monday before the Saturday, and so they filed another appeal asking the court for emergency relief. What you ought to ask yourselves is, relief from what? Relief from y'all? Maybe that's what it is, because what I learned is that when we created the circumstances so that you could vote on Saturday, a lot of college students that I bumped into and their parents said, thank you for doing that, because now my college student can vote on that Saturday. Otherwise, we weren't sure how we were going to figure it out. So thank you for doing that. They asked for relief, emergency relief. Well, I think that you ought to answer their prayer. I think you ought to give them their heart's desire. We've got one more day to bring this thing home, and I want you to create a real 911 emergency. I want you to vote like it's an emergency. I want you to vote like democracy depends on it. Vote like health care depends on it. Vote like a woman's right to choose depends on it, because it does. You ought to vote like it's an emergency. Let's get this thing done. My whole life, I've been committed to service. When I was sitting where you sit, and even earlier, I caught this kind of contagion, this virus, if you will. If it ever gets a hold of you, I'm telling you, it's stubborn. It won't let you go. It is the passion and the desire to make your life count, to want to make a difference in the world, to see the world as it is and to be grateful for where you live and what you have, but to know that we can do better. And if you ever get that virus, I'm telling you, it's hard to shake it. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed before I was born, but his voice captured my imagination, and part of what I was drawn to was the way in which he used his faith, not as a weapon to crush other people, but as a bridge to bring us together. Because he understood that God is known by many names and worshiped in many houses. And I've taken that same spirit with me. I've tried to take that same spirit with me to the United States Senate. It is my faith that drives me to do this work. And when I say that, I don't mean the peculiar nuances of my faith as a Christian or even my faith as a Baptist. I mean the values that I think are resonant in all of the great faith traditions and in all of the great moral traditions. Values like justice making and truth telling and love of neighbor and empathy and compassion and mercy. I think that those are values that all of us can embrace. And the role of democracy is to help us to find a way to instill those values in public policy. And so I'm running for re-election not because I'm in love with politics. I'm running for re-election because I'm in love with change. Can I let you in on a secret? It's a strange thing for a guy to say the day before he hopes to get re-elected. I tolerate politics so I can do what has been my life's project, and that is to create a more just and fair world, an America that moves a little bit closer towards its ideals of equal protection under the law. That's why I deal with the nonsense of Washington, because every now and then you get a win. Every now and then you get to do something amazing like pass the expanded child tax credit, which if we extend it would cut child poverty 40 to 50%. For me, that's worth it. Every now and then you get to do something amazing like cap the cost of prescription drugs for seniors so they don't have to choose between buying groceries and buying medicine. Every now and then you get to do something amazing like cap the cost of insulin so folk don't have to ration their insulin. Every now and then you get to do something amazing like stand up for our veterans so that those who fight for us don't have to fight with us to get the benefits that they deserve. Every now and then you get to do something amazing like appoint the first black woman and confirm her to the United States Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown Jackson. The day we confirmed her was an amazing day. Let me just say this in closing, and nobody believes a Baptist preacher when he says in closing. The day we confirmed Ketanji Brown Jackson, sounds like you've been to my church. The day we confirmed her, the chamber was full on both sides of the aisle. And the vice president was sitting in the chair because it was quite a moment. And my colleague, Cory Booker, and I were standing near the vice president, just chatting with her, waiting on the vote to open. And she said, guys, you know, this is quite a moment. You ought to take this moment maybe and why don't you write a letter to somebody who comes to your mind? Maybe you should write a letter. She made that suggestion the way black women make suggestions. And then she reached into her portfolio and gave each of us a sheet of paper. But not just any sheet of paper. It was the letterhead of the Vice President of the United States. It didn't take me long at all to know who I should write that letter to. Because the only job I love more than being your United States Senator, the only job I love more than being the pastor of Ebenezer Church is being Chloe and Caleb's dad. My daughter is 6. My son later this month will be 4. And they are the 2 brightest stars in my universe. They are the reason I do this work. And so I sat down and I wrote a letter and I said, Dear Chloe, today we confirm to the United States Supreme Court Ketanji Brown Jackson. In the long history of our nation, she is the first Supreme Court justice who looks like you, with hair like yours. While we were confirming her, the vice president suggested that I write a letter. By the way, in the long history of our nation, she is the first vice president who looks like you. I write this letter to say that in America, you can become and you can achieve anything you set your head and your heart to do. Love, Dad. That was my letter to my daughter. But I was thinking about all of our daughters. And I really do mean all of our daughters. But not only that, I was thinking about all of our sons. I was thinking about all of us. Because here is the premise behind our democratic experiment. It operates on the assumption that a ceiling on any one of us for any reason is in a real sense a ceiling on all of us. We all do better when we can all do better. And so each of us has a stake in the promise of a Ketanji Brown Jackson sitting on the United States Supreme Court. I was so overwhelmed by the thought of it all that I couldn't wait to fly back home to Georgia. I got on FaceTime to read that letter to my daughter, who at the time was 5, and I said, Chloe, I got a letter I want to read to you, and I was on FaceTime reading it to her. I poured my heart out. She listened. She was not impressed. She said, can I go play now? She didn't quite understand it then, but she'll get it later. But in the months since I wrote that letter to my daughter, it occurred to me that that's what legislation is. It really is a letter to our children. What we do on climate change or what we fail to do regarding the existential threat of climate change is a letter to our children, to your generation and the next. What we do on health care is a letter to our children. What we do on criminal justice reform and on the issue of race in America is a letter to our children. How we respond in the wake of a killing, whether it's in a gay nightclub or Jewish worshipers in a temple or Muslim worshipers, it is a letter to our children. And if we ask ourselves what we want that letter to say, we might actually get it right. But what you do in the next 24 hours, in this moment in which there are forces trying to divide our country, is a letter to the next generation. And if you've got that same contagion that I caught when I was your age, that desire for your life to count, to make a difference in the world, to push us closer towards our ideals, I would ask for you to stand with me one more time and let's write a letter to the future. Let's push this country a little bit closer towards its ideals. Let's stand up for workers. Let's stand up for veterans. Let's stand up for women. And let's build a nation and a state that embraces all of our children. Here's why you know I want this job. This is the 5th time my name has been on the ballot in less than 2 years for the same doggone job. But the first time my name was on the ballot, I finished first. The second time my name was on the ballot, I finished first. The third time my name was on the ballot, I finished first. The fourth time my name was on the ballot, I finished first. And if you would stand with me one more time, we are going to finish first one more time. Are you ready? Are you ready to write a letter to the future? Are you ready to stand up for one Georgia? Are you ready to stand up for all of our children? Call your friends, call your neighbors, call your ex, and tell them, don't get excited. I just called to tell you to vote. Let's get this thing done one more time. God bless you, Georgia Tech. Keep the faith and keep looking up.